Hello, Tom Maguire. I'm just going to review the book Rebuild by Mary Portas, just recently out. I listened to this one on Audible. It's narrated by Mary Portas. She's got a great voice. She's the sort of person you can imagine doing a voiceover in some sort of Hollywood film or some kind of British rom-com or something. I mean, I don't even know if she's been in anything like that. She may well have been, to be fair, so correct me on that if I'm wrong. But yeah, she's great to listen to. And in this review, I am just going to sort of tell you about, well, basically kind of my expectations for this book to begin with. And then how, as the book went on, those kind of expectations changed to a certain extent. So I'm not going to give any spoilers for this review. As I always say on this channel, my book reviews are honest. I've got no reason to lie or to make people look good necessarily. I do these reviews as a way of kind of practicing my speaking, but also to kind of concrete the stuff that I've read as well in my mind, or sort of crystallize it in my mind. Once I've read something, I like to go over it and talk about it. I like to, any book that I read, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, whether it's a strict personal development or self-help type book, whatever it is, I like to try and relate it to personal development in some way. I like to try and give you the lessons that I've learned from it. For me, that's really important. That's one of the reasons I read close to 100 books a year. I absolutely love reading, but I also do read to try and improve myself as well. So I read for the sake of it. Sometimes I fully believe in reading for the sake of it and just enjoying reading, but I also read to develop myself and also to leave some reviews to my kids as well, so they can laugh at me when they're older and get a bit of an idea of the sort of stuff that I read and that kind of shaped me in a way, because I think books are really important. So always really honest reviews on this channel. This one, like I say, I had quite high expectations. What I've seen of Mary Portas, I quite like her. My first experience, weirdly, was when I lived in London. I lived in Bayswater, kind of Notting Hill area with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And we had a really weird experience with a bloke over the road who didn't want us living where we were, but he used to shout out the window to us that he didn't want us there. And he used to say how Mary Portas this and Mary Portas that. And we didn't really understand what he was talking about, bless him. But he ended up attacking our car one day and the police had to come and arrest him, bless him. But that was kind of my first sort of experience of her. I didn't even know who she was at the time. This was quite a few years ago. He was obviously quite passionate about her for some reason, bless him. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a random story, but a kind of strange one, sort of sticks in my mind really. But yeah, she speaks really well. I like the overall, I think the overall message of the book is really good. I think you'd have to be a bit sort of, I don't want to say crazy, but I can't imagine too many people disagreeing with the overall message of the book. You know, I think, you know, what she's basically kind of saying is that after COVID and all the changes that COVID kind of forced in business and the way that we do things day to day, that the way we tend to buy more locally, or, you know, we're forced to buy more locally and kind of support each other a bit more. That hopefully we should kind of stay there to a certain extent and not go back to the kind of excessive bottom line left brain thinking way of doing things that we have been for so long. And that really interested me because Ian McGilchrist recently wrote a book called, is it The Divided Brain? I reviewed it recently. I can't remember the name of it now. It's a very long book, but it's very, very good. The Master and His Emissary, that's what it's called. Fantastic book, and he talks about the left and right brain hemisphere differences, and he talks about how it's so important that we get back to not thinking too much in a left brain way where everything's about the bottom line, reducing things all the time, you know, how much money we can make, tallying things up. We need to get back to a place where we care about being in awe and being creative and enjoying things that we can't explain necessarily, enjoying things for the sake of it to a certain extent. So it really kind of pricked my ears up when Mary Portas sort of mentioned that left brain way of seeing things and that we've been doing that for such a long time. And she's basically giving, you know, she's an expert in fashion and business and, you know, the high street and all of that, has been for a long time. She's very successful. And I assume she's very financially successful. She certainly sounds as though she is. I haven't really looked her up on Google or anything like that, but I assume she is. And that kind of leads me to a little bit of my issue with the book to a certain extent. And, you know, like I say, you don't have to agree with my criticisms necessarily, but for me, I just felt that in places it felt a little bit preachy. And I know lots of books feel like that, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault. And, you know, we just kind of listen to things or read things differently, don't we? We have our own reasons for reacting to things. But I think I think there is something about kind of middle class, successful type people preaching about being more kind and generous when it comes to business that just doesn't sit all that comfortably. And I'm the first to admit I'm middle class. I'm very privileged. I consider myself to have been extremely privileged and lucky growing up. I've made all my own money, to be fair, without any help from anyone. And I am where I am today through my own hard work and hard work with my wife as well. So, but I'd never claim to be a completely self-made man or anything like that. Going back to the times of Dickens or what have you, I don't necessarily believe in all that. I had a very good start in life, and that does count for a lot. Sometimes it can be a disadvantage because it leaves you feeling less hungry, I think, potentially. But some of the stuff she was saying just kind of sounded a little bit difficult to swallow, I think, because she mentioned a billionaire at one point who she knows, and I can't remember the name of them, to be fair. And I haven't gone back and done my research. I just want to talk about it. She mentioned some billionaire who said that if you were to ask them how much money they made last year or how much money they make at the minute, they wouldn't know. They'd have to, because they don't care, because it's not important compared to the good that they do. And I just thought that's a bit bullshit, isn't it? It's like, if you're a really successful business person, you're a billionaire or a multi-millionaire or whatever, you know how much money you're making. You're on top of all that stuff. And to say that you're not is just a bit insulting, I think, to people. If you don't care about money, then you've basically never really had to worry about it, have you? And I just sort of think when people say stuff like that, it just sits a bit uncomfortably. It's great. We should be interdependent. We should be caring about each other. We should be caring about the things that we buy. I've said plenty of times before, Dostoevsky said something along the lines of every man is responsible for himself and responsible for every other man as well. And that's a big thing to swallow, isn't it? The idea that we're all responsible for each other. But actually, it's not until we take that attitude that we will start to improve things. And actually, if we're going out and we're preaching to everyone about recycling and not eating beef and reducing our carbon footprint, yet we go to Primark and spend a couple of quid on clothes that have been manufactured in some kind of slave labour somewhere across the world. It's just hypocritical, isn't it? So, and we're not going to get this stuff right all the time. Of course, we're not. We need our governments to kind of lead and to give us a certain amount of leadership on this stuff to a certain extent, because people are going to spend less if they possibly can, particularly if they're struggling. And it just felt a little bit like that in this book. It was a bit like, oh yeah, we're successful. I'm successful. It's all about giving back. Yes. Okay, we know that. But if you're kind of someone who's struggling a bit in business and you've got the threat of not being able to pay your bills or going bankrupt, you probably are going to care a little bit less about that stuff and care a little bit more about making sure you've got enough money in your account to a certain extent. And I just didn't feel as though that was well balanced enough in the book. It was a bit kind of no longer can we be, and it did feel a bit sort of sexist as well. No longer can we be kind of fat cat men who, have not cared for so long and been so patriarchal for so long and greedy and stuff. It's like, works both ways. Women do it as well, to be fair. Just as bad. And that kind of male-female divide thing, I just think is a bit unnecessary. I think it kind of dilutes the argument a little bit. And I just think there is loads we can do, and there are some really good business books out there that talk about what we can do to be more successful by being better, by giving more back, this kindness economy type thing. But I just think there are books out there that do it better than this one. This one felt a little bit preachy to me. It just grated on me a little bit. Some of the books you recommended were really good. They kind of got me listening. I think I'd read sort of 80% of them. It talks about Carlo Rovelli and is it Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, and there's a few more in there as well that I'd read. So I liked that. I like hearing those good book recommendations. But it just and as it went on, I just found it got a little bit boring. It just lost my attention to a certain extent. Once I'd heard about this kindness economy and kind of not being about the bottom line, trying to find ways innovatively of giving more back to society. Once I'd heard that message, it was just a bit kind of, it just got a bit boring for me after that. So I don't like giving negative reviews of books, to be fair. I think, I've never written a book before. I hope to one day, but, it's extremely difficult to write a book and it's extremely difficult to write a really successful one. So I'm not taking anything away from the author. but I'm just giving my honest opinion. I read a lot of really good books, and this one just left me a little bit cold. It just didn't work quite so well for me. I would say if you haven't necessarily read a lot of personal development books around kind of business and giving back to the community and working interdependently and not just being about the bottom line and service and all of that, if you haven't read many books like that and you don't know much about it, then I would recommend this as a fairly easy, quick one, just to give you that idea of how important it is, because it is a really important message. But there are better books out there. I'll edit them in afterwards, because I can't remember the name now. There's one by I think it's called something along the lines of Christian Business or something by a Jewish chap, which is really, really good for this. I will edit it in afterwards, like I say. But yeah, I'm not saying don't go out and listen to it, don't go out and read it. She's very good to listen to, fantastic narration. There are some really good ideas in there. There are some quite interesting stories in there. But it just left me a little bit cold. I was just a bit disappointed. So there's my honest review. Thanks very much. Again, apologies for the environment. I'm still building. Everything's upside down at the minute. But I look forward to doing the next review. At the minute, I'm listening to Alistair Brownlee's book, Relentless, which is really, really good. So I'll have a review on that very, very soon. So as usual, thank you very much. Keep liking, subscribing, and I'll be back soon. Cheers.